2 to go or final lap, confusion in the final minutes of the Rolex 24 as nobody knew if the race was truly over. So this year's ending to the Rolex 24 was a little bit confusing. But prior to that, I felt like this year's Rolex was a tale of 3 stages. The first stage was a bit messy. There were a bunch of LMP2 incidents that brought out full course yellows. And as we moved into the second stage, we saw it become more of a war of attrition. Lots of cars dropped out due to mechanical issues or just fell out of contention. And then there was the final stage of the race. Pretty clean running, but ultimately a full course yellow at the end of this stage set up a sprint to the finish. That sprint did not disappoint. In the final 30 minutes, there were some incredible battles up and down the grid from GTP to LMP2 and a great battle that unfolded in the GTD class. But the question that ultimately remains is, should they have been racing for one more lap? There was confusion at the end of the race when it appeared that there were 2 laps to go, and indeed, there was only 1 lap to go. The white flag was being shown to the GTD cars, but not to the GTP cars. Now, it's right after the race. We don't really truly know everything that happened yet. Editor Stu here, and Imsa has actually clarified exactly what has happened at the end of the race. They released this statement that reads, "Due to an officiating error in race control, Imsa inadvertently announced and subsequently displayed the white flag with under 3 minutes remaining in the race. At the end of the lap, the race-leading number 7 GTP car then received the checkered flag with 1 minute and 35 seconds still remaining, ending the race short of the planned 24 hours by effectively 1 lap. Based on Article 49 of the sporting regulations, should the checkered flag be inadvertently or otherwise displayed before the leading car completes the scheduled number of laps or before the prescribed time has completed, the race is nevertheless deemed ended when the flag is displayed." Honestly, good on Imsa for releasing this, clarifying exactly what happened and admitting to the error. Although it is disappointing, I think it clears up a lot of the confusion that fans had after yesterday's race. I think with that, we just move on to Sebring. In the meantime, though, we had some worthy champions of the Rolex 24 this year, starting off with the GTP class. In the GTP class, it was a number 7 Porsche Penske Motorsports car driven by Dane Cameron, Felipe Nasr, Matt Campbell, and Joseph Newgarden. They edged out the number 31 Action Express Racing Cadillac for second place, with the number 40 Wayne Taylor Racing with Andretti Acura rounding out the podium. In LMP2 was number 18 Era Motorsports Orica, driven by Dwight Merriman, Ryan DeLille, Connor Zilich, and Christian Rasmussen that picked up the class win there. They beat out the 04 CrowdStrike Racing and the number 74 Riley Motorsports Orica. In the GTD Pro class, as I said, it was a complete war of attrition here. Number 62, Risi Competizione Ferrari, driven by Daniel Serra, David Rigon, Alessandro Piriguidi, and James Collado picked up the class win, ahead of Rexy, the number 77 AO Racing Porsche, and the number 1 Paul Miller Racing BMW that had some late issues with a brake change that ultimately put them a couple of laps down. And then there's GTD, the number 57 Windward Racing Mercedes of Russell Ward, Philippe Ellis, Indy Donche, and Daniel Morad picked up the win there, ahead of the number 21 AF Corsa Ferrari and the number 34 Conquest Racing Ferrari. As I said, this really was a race of 3 stages. In the early stage of this race, there were some silly LMP2 incidents that we saw out on track, but things cleaned themselves up nicely as the sun went down. As the sun went down, the Cadillac that had dominated much of the first portion of this race was met with some competition from the Porsches. Porsche was quite strong through the evening, and they carried that over into the morning hours. When it came down to crunch time, the Cadillac and the Porsches were extremely close to one another, and really it was anybody's race. A final late race restart ultimately decided this race. Looking back throughout the race, there were a few manufacturers that are merged as the strong ones here. In GTP, Cadillac and Porsche really showed their strengths here. They were clearly a step above the Acura and the BMW. BMW unfortunately had some issues through the night that took them out of contention, and Acura had some issues as well. But at the end of the day, it was Porsche and Cadillac that showed the most pace throughout the week, and either one of them would be a very worthy winner of this year's 24. Looking to the GT classes, well, there were a few that emerged. Mercedes was strong, Ferrari was strong, Lamborghini was quite strong as well. But ultimately, it was the Ferrari and the Mercedes that emerged victorious in those two classes, Ferrari winning their third major 24-hour race in the last 12 months, while Mercedes continues to add to their legacy in this race with yet another victory. Looking at the sports series that were here this weekend, the Whelen Mazda MX-5 Cup had two races at Daytona. The first one featured an incredible finish that saw Gresham Wagner pick up the win by 0.06 of a second over Tyler Gonzalez. Meanwhile, in race 2, it was Nate Cicero picking up the win in a drag race to the finish line. You can go check out both of those races on Imsa's YouTube channel. The Michelin Pilot Challenge also had their season-opening 4-hour race. There, both classes had some great racing and it came right down to the final laps in both. But in Grand Sport, it was Michael McCarthy, Riley Dickinson, and Brady Golan in the number 91 Kelly Moss Porsche, taking the win over the Windward Racing number 57 Mercedes. Pretty incredible for Kelly Moss considering how last minute that program came together. In TCR, it was yet another Audi victory. This time, it was the number 17 JDC Miller Motorsports entry, driven by Mikey Taylor and Chris Miller. They had quite the weekend as they were in desperate need of an ECU for the car, just in order to make the race. They ended up sourcing one from a wrecked race car in Mexico and flew it up just in time for the start of the race. A couple of Brian Herta Autosports Hyundais rounded out the podium there, the number 76, who actually ran out of fuel in the run-up to the finish line, but managed to hang on for second, and the number 98 rounded out the podium. This weekend featured some great racing and was topped off by a very exciting, albeit a little bit confusing at the end, Rolex 24. I want to give a big thank you to everybody that stopped and said hi to me this weekend. I appreciate all the support that you guys give, and hopefully you guys are all enjoying the show and enjoyed the race. Also, a big shout out to all the Patreon supporters. If you too want to support the show, you can head to patreon.com/offintheesses. Once again, though, thanks for tuning in. I hope everyone has a great race weekend and doesn't go off in the S's.